Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Poet Speaks podcast. Now, our next guest is an LA-based poet and educator born in La Mesa, California, and raised in Portland, Oregon. Her debut poetry collection, Dreaming in Mourning, is published by World Stage Press. She's a 2022 Inaugural Workshop Fellow with Obsidian Magazine's O Sessions, Black Listening, a performance masterclass, and is a new faculty member teaching beginning poetry at UCLA Extension Writers Program. Everyone, welcome to the Poet Speaks podcast, Benin Lemus. Benin, how are you?
Amanda, I'm doing great on this early morning. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm nice and peaceful. You know, that's actually a word I'd like to use. I'm feeling a lot more peaceful than I have as of lately. So I'm feeling good, feeling good.
I
So
love it.
tell me, where are you located in the world right now? Where are we talking to you from?
So, like many of your guests, I am chatting with you from South Los Angeles, also known as South Central Los Angeles.
Nice.
And of course, we know that it is unceded Tongva land. So before it was South LA, before it was South Central, it was Tongva land. And that is where I am chatting with you from.
Awesome. That is amazing. All right. Yeah. There we go. LA. Now tell me a little bit. You and I'm also curious. So born in La Mesa, but raised in Oregon, then you
Yes.
went back to LA or you went back to California. Tell us a little bit about your childhood and how that kind of background. LA to Portland, Oregon, those are two different places for sure.
Yes. Oh, without a doubt. And actually, La Mesa is in San Diego County. So
Mm,
it's LA County, Orange County, and then San Diego County. So I
mm,
was born in La Mesa, which is a small suburb of the city of San Diego. And my parents are academics, specifically my dad. So we started off as a dean and working in community colleges. So we started off as a dean and then went to vice president, all of the different ways in which you can work in community college administration. And then when I was in fourth grade, he got a job as president of Portland Community College. Oh, no, I think he was vice president of Portland Community College. So
mm.
when I was in fourth grade, the family moved, and there was a little pit stop. We lived in Stockton, California for a few years, where my parents were actually raised.
Mm.
And then we went to Portland. So when I was in fourth grade, my dad was the vice president of PCC, and we lived there from fourth grade all the way through high school. I graduated from high school in Portland, Oregon. So I went to North Carolina for college. I went to Bennett College, which is a HBCU, a Black women's college,
Mm.
and then I went to graduate school in film at USC. So that's what actually brought me to LA, and I've been here ever since.
No, that is amazing. So that's a pretty dot all over. So
Yeah.
you live West Coast, North Carolina, excuse me, North or South Carolina, was it?
North Carolina, which is considered it's considered the Southeast.
Okay. So you live West Coast, South, East Coast, then yeah, so you've been definitely dotted all over the place. Tell me a little bit about where did poetry find you along that journey? Or did you find poetry when in childhood, or where did poetry find you along that journey as you kind of traveled across the US?
I've been thinking about that because I was on another panel and someone asked me, how did I know I was a poet? Where did I find poetry? And I was racking my brain because
Mm,
so much of my life has been infused with poetry. I grew up in a household of readers. And if you go to my parents' house when I was a kid, and even now, if you go to their house, it doesn't have as many books as it used to because they're getting older and they're kind of thinning out the house. But I grew up with a lot of books. I grew up just reading was part of my everyday life, going to the library. So I don't remember exactly when I said I'm a poet. I remember in college really liking poetry and in fact starting poetry salons and that were very successful there and I felt like it was because I was an English major. I felt that poetry was this art form, this genre that I think spoke to my heart.
Mm.
And it just resonated with me more than novels, more than short stories. Like, in fact, I never really connected with short stories. But poetry was this genre that spoke to me in a way that I always carried it with me. And I can think of two instances where I feel that I probably was like my burgeoning poet. One is in 3rd grade, I received the principal's writing circle award, which I still have because, your parents save everything. And my mom sent me a box of stuff. And I was like, what is this? From Anza Elementary School, principal's writing circle award. So I would say that from a very early age, I've been writing and I've always been intentional. And then I think where poetry play comes in is when I learned to read with phonics. I'm not sure how kids learn to read today, but I learned to read with phonics. And poetry, especially when we're talking about formed poetry, um, with rhyme scheme, that was my earliest exposure because you had hop, pop, um, bob, um, can't remember the other ones, but like mop, stop, right? So
Yeah.
poetry is sort of already it's already built in rhythmically and it's already built in with the structure. So I do remember some of the books when I was a kid, really enjoying that literary and phonic play. And I think that primed me for poetry. I'll say that.
Absolutely. No, I completely understand your take on that. I think the kind of rhythmic, yeah, I remember when I was growing up, I remember there was like a popular kind of disc. It was like a CD. It was called Hooked on Phonics,
Mhm.
where they would like they had the commercials all the time, and I remember seeing that in like kindergarten. Yeah, that kind of sonic way of
Yeah.
understanding words and learning
Yeah.
how to speak and write through that really does kind of linking people to finding poetry and finding like it speaking to your heart. I can definitely
Yes.
see where that comes from. Tell us a bit about, so you kind of you remember that aspect of your life from that young point of childhood. Tell us, like, how did that transform as you started? You went to school K through 12, and then you became, you started going to, you went to an HBCU. Tell us what poetry looked like as you became like formed into your adulthood.
Oh, yes. So because I was an English major, I was doing a lot of reading and I was doing a lot of writing. And of course, if you go to an HBCU, I think many universities, but when you go to an HBCU and you are in a literature class, you are absolutely going to dive deep into the poetics of Black writing.
Mm,
So, the Harlem Renaissance, of course, you cannot escape. You have, and then but even earlier before that, Phyllis Wheatley, like the great writers and orators of our time. So, when I was in college, I was very much doing a lot of reading and poetry. I think along with the work of Toni Morrison,
mm,
Margaret Walker really spoke to me. And I think with Toni Morrison and Margaret Walker, who was a novelist and a poet, the rhythm and the rhyme schemes and the ways in which they told stories really spoke to me. And I just remember having a journal, and I've journaled since I was a kid. My journals were always filled with, obviously like my youthful angst, but there were also a lot of poems in there. So I seem to recall in college doing a lot more writing in poetry. And I didn't see I didn't see any poetry salons happening. I didn't see that. So I started one. There was in the basement of our student union, there was an empty cafe that had been used maybe in the 80s and nobody was using it. And
mm.
so I asked the whoever was in charge of facilities, "Hey, can I have a poetry reading?" And he was like, "Yeah, okay." And so I got some friends from North Carolina A&T. We did advertisements, which is the big state university
Mm,
down the road from us, which is a HBCU, but it's a co-ed, agricultural and technical state university, Aggie Pride. Um, and I got some friends of mine and said, "Hey, I'm going to start this thing. Do you guys want to do it?" And everyone was like, "Yeah." And they were really successful. So that's where I started to see other people also care about poetry. And I just started writing more and more poetry. reading more. And I think part of that has to do with being an English major. So, for example, if I was in computer science or biology, I probably wouldn't have as much access to it. But being an English major, that was part of my education, along with, like I said, Harlem Renaissance, before that, Phillis Wheatley, and then, of course, the poets of the 1960s, the Black Arts movement. And because I went to an HBCU and part of our existence is resistance to systems, poetry, the great poets, I mean, you could name off, hundreds of them. That's
Mhm,
part of our education. And I found my voice in poetry and said to myself, okay, this is something I want to keep
mhm.
in my world forever. I am a poet. I am a poet.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I love that part of the HBCU experiences. Our existence is resistance. That's very powerful, powerful words. I'm so curious then, as you've had that definitely that type of realization of how important the word is in your life and so many of the people's lives around you as you have been with that education of that Black resistance, going to an HBCU, learning Harlem Renaissance, Black Arts Movement, etc. How important do you think is, as a person that is now teaching beginning poetry at a UCLA Extension's Writers Program, how important do you think, or do you feel like poetry and that writing is still greatly ingrained in a lot of the education today? Do you feel like the youth of today in universities, is there still a solid place where the arts and the writing and poetry is still profound in people's lives, or do you think that's missing?
That's interesting because I think it depends on where you go. I know that in Los Angeles, we have Diane Luby Lane's Get Lit program, which I remember it started, I want to say maybe 15 years ago,
Mm,
as a as a connection between what we would call classic poems, poems that are in the traditional canon, and then also a claim and a contemporary not a contemporary poem, but a classic poem, and then a new poem that you write. And so her organization is a spoken word organization that is in schools, and I'm sure it's in dozens of schools now. You've got Poetry Out Loud. You've got the Poet Laureate program that Amanda Gorman, she came out of the Get Lit program, and then, of course, was the Los Angeles Youth Poet Laureate, and then became National Poet Laureate. So I think that poetry has this ebb and flow depending on how people um, access it. So, for example, I think that the spoken word genre, the genre of poetry of spoken word, is very much alive. I'm gonna claim that, Love Jones was part of its resurgence. I think Love Jones came out in, like, 1994, 1995, but everybody was like, "I'm gonna be a spoken word poet." But I think that's great. I think, you've got the New Yorican Poets Cafe, you've got, World Stage here in Leimert Park, and I'm sure there's, many, many places in so many cities. So I think that in general, it's still alive. I think people still absolutely study it. The proliferation of MFA programs that offer poetry as a discipline, as a major. So I think that it is much more available and respected in universities, and it's more diverse than it has been. I always think, in fact, the past few years, I was thinking about my own education. And when I was in college, being a poetry major, getting a BFA in poetry was not going to be a thing. It was not a thing. And so now young people can major in poetry, creative writing with a concentration in poetry. I think it depends on where you go, but I do feel that it is offered more in universities. It is still taught. I think in high schools, it's still fairly rigid in its thinking in terms of canon. It's white men, it's Shakespeare, it's
yeah.
we're still teaching the Petrarchan sonnet, which we should, but I don't think that it has. I think we need teachers to take a risk and expand their their understanding of poetry so they can do a better job of teaching it. And that's what I try to do in my own location. And with UCLA, it's actually not our most highly attended um class, poetry. So I'm hoping to change that.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that sounds that I do think I do see where you're coming from. There is so many different canonized opportunities in the niche of what is already poetry. And there are so many programs that definitely are proliferating through there. But we also see poetry in so many public spaces, presidential inaugurations, opening ceremonies for the Olympics. I mean,
Yeah.
we see poetry everywhere, so kind of getting the word out, of what is just around us universally, our oral traditions. No, I love that though. Tell us, so let's moving on a bit. Tell us, Benin, about your debut poetry collection. It's called Dreaming in Mourning. That is such a bit, I guess, of a title that is a contradiction, right? Dreaming in Mourning. Tell us a bit about what that collection, what that spans, and what the inspiration behind that was and is.
Thank you. Yeah, so it came out in 2022, World Stage Press, which is a Black-owned press here in Los Angeles, and they've been doing really incredible work of publishing local poets. They also have, a more national outreach. But the idea is to get all of our to sort of buck the trend of traditional big five poetry houses, publishing houses, and to really make sure that voices are heard. So when I completed during the pandemic, I was in a program called Community Literature Initiative, CLI, and I was writing every week.
Mm.
I was in workshop every week for 1 year. And it was a really important time for me because the pandemic was extremely challenging for all of us. We all showed up in different ways. Some of us were more successful than others in terms of navigating the sickness, the space of sickness. So I was at home with my family, and I had been wanting to do more writing, but because of my job, I commute to work and I have a family. I was writing, but I wasn't writing as much as I wanted to write.
Mm.
So CLI was wonderful because Monday nights I was writing, I was workshopping 3 hours a week, and I had a momentum. It was also the year of the murder of George Floyd, all of the racial unrest that had just basically the top had blown off, right? It's been brewing and the top had blown off. So at the end of my year, I had the opportunity to put my manuscript together through the class. So World Stage Press and CLI are not connected, but they're related. And so I had the opportunity to put my manuscript together. And I was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to do that. I had poems that I brought to workshop that I had written, years past. I had new poems that I had written, but I was like, no, I don't think I'm going to do a manuscript. I don't think that's going to be for me. But my instructor, Hiram, was like, "I think you should put a manuscript together. I really love your poems. I don't understand why you're not putting a manuscript together." And so I was like, "Okay, I'll put a manuscript together." And once I had it done, I started thinking about I should go pitch it to some people.
Mm.
And World Stage Press was one of the people that I was gonna pitch it to, and I had a list of places where I was gonna pitch it. So I went to Hiram and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna pitch it out to some places." And he was like, "World Stage Press wants it. We'll take it right now." And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yes, we'll take it right now." And so from there, that's where my process began. Um, and the title comes from, and you're right, there is a contradiction, but when we think about the Black experience, it's actually quite appropriate, I think, because when I was looking at the poems, I had printed them out, I had laid them on my dining room table, I had sorted them, um, pulled the poems that I didn't think really worked, put poems that were related on one side, put poems that were related with another theme on another side. And what emerged was this idea that even in our darkest times, especially as Black people, we have in an indomitable hope about the future. And so when I was bouncing titles back with myself and writing and dreaming and mourning came to mind. Like the first half of the book, I think, is a lot of sadness. It's a lot of of contemplation about the the grief that we hold in our world. And then the second half of the book, because I wanted to leave the reader with this idea that there is light. And so the dreaming is the second half of the book where we as a collective think about and reflect, how do we want to show up more positively in this world to make the things that that create sadness, how can we not necessarily overcome, but work with that? So that's where the dreaming in our mourning comes from. And I think about Robin D.G. Kelly's book, freedom dreaming, right? The freedom dreams, that out of that sadness, especially as Black people, but I think all people have this way of, we cannot let our circumstances bring us all the way down.
Mm, absolutely. Tell us a bit about how that kind of shaped the poetic form of how you kind of put that collection together of those kind of two, I guess you could say, polar opposites. Again, that dreaming, us, like you said, us as a Black community, a lot of our future is this constance of hope for the future, but hope for a better future in the same present tense of us um dying currently, right, at the hands of so many different social aspects. Did
Yeah.
that take place in somewhat of a poetic form as you're just crafting together your poetry and crafting together your words?
It did, and I think when I'm thinking about poems, like, even when I submit poems and I submit, let's say there's an opportunity, to submit to a journal and they want 3 to 4 poems. I always try to put the 3 to 4 poems that fit together like a puzzle. So
Mm,
I'm always thinking poetically, if you will. I'm always thinking in rhythm. I'm always thinking in, for example, enjambment, right? So there's the line, and I'm going to continue the line on the next line. So I'm going to let it flow over. I'm always thinking in that way. I'm thinking about, what's the first poem I want you to read? What's the last poem I want you to read?
mm,
How do I want to give you a breath in the middle? So yes, so when I was putting my collection together, so as a concrete example, in my book, there's invocation, what the poet says to the world. So I'm opening up uh, uh, our service, if you will. I'm opening up our gathering time together. So when you open the book, when a reader opens the book, the first poem is the invitation. It's the prayer, if you will, of what I'm going to do, or what poetry is going to do for you, the reader.
mm,
And then the last poem is the archaeologist,
mm,
which is about uncovering your life, but also acknowledging that the difficulties in your life are also born from, like, underneath the difficulties of your life, there's something beautiful. So I'm taking those two ideas and I'm bookending them. And then in the middle, I have all the poems that kind of meet.
mm,
Right? So we're not just putting poems, we're not putting 50 poems together and slapping a cover on them. Like, it's very intentional. I'm taking you through an experience. And each poem has a specific place. And I'm thinking very intentionally about that. If I'm talking about the the murders of black men in America, that's got to go in a very specific place in the mourning section. What's the poem before it? What's the poem after it? So I'm guiding you as a reader, especially if you were a reader who's going to read cover to cover. Some people, when they read poetry, don't do that.
mm.
But I'm taking you through a specific journey.
Absolutely. No, I can tell there's such a passion behind how you every like you said, very intentional about how that the whole piece has came together. Again, I kind of want to hit back on what was the kind of what was the step that really made you create this piece though? You seem very, like you said, it was so based upon us as the Black community. A lot of us do have plans for the future while we're still crumbling in what is our present reality today. Was there an incident, like you had mentioned, the George Floyd murder? Was there an incident or was there something in your life that moved you to create this piece and it's so intentional with who it's for and its audience?
Oh, that's a thank you for that question. I think it was timing.
Mm,
So 2020, and by the time I finished with so I finished my workshop year, that was 2021. And then I started, really refining the manuscript. That was all 2021. And then going into 2022, I think that what I the first step, Amanda, was getting over my own imposter syndrome about putting a book out. I
mm,
think that first I did not feel qualified to put a book out, and it's strange because I've published a lot, and so I'm not sure, where that came from, but I was like, but I was scared. I think I was scared to put a book out. And but I was already on the train. I had signed my contract with World Stage Press. Like the book was gonna happen, right? So like
yeah,
you gotta do it.
yeah.
But then I was thinking about all the poems that I had written prior to my workshop year. In 2012, I had two very important incidents happen. In June of 2012, my youngest daughter was born. And in December of 2012, my brother was killed by police in San Bernardino. So as my daughter was coming into the world, my brother was leaving the world. And that was an immense amount of grief. And I feel like there was also a time it was hard to talk about it, in part because we also had Trayvon Martin, we had Michael Brown. I don't remember the order in which, the men were killed, but we had a lot of trauma. And I think I was looking for a place for that. And so a lot of my writing was grappling with how do I feel this anger? How do I feel this deep sadness? And how do I also, for my kids, feel a sense of hope because they have a future. Like we're not done. Like we've got a lot more life to live. So when I was thinking about the book, that was one of my, I think my one of the energies that was pushing me forward was this book could be an opportunity to do a couple of things.
Mm,
One is that it could be an opportunity to to have a conversation about uplifting people and also acknowledging our grief. It could do those two things. It could also be an opening for people who don't really read or purchase poetry. So I was thinking about that as well. There are many people who come to my readings, they don't go to other people's readings or they read what I share on Instagram
mm,
and not just my stuff, but like I share other people's stuff and they're like, Benin, I never really got poetry until I started listening to you or until I started, following the people that you follow. And so to that I say, then I felt like the book had a bit of a responsibility.
mm,
And then I got excited. Like, "Oh, okay. I can bring new readers into poetry because I'm all about that," which is why I'm excited about teaching Poetry 1 because I feel like poetry is not necessarily underrated, but I feel like there is this veil of mystery and intimidation that many people don't wanna come close to it. So I feel like one thing that I can do is I can do some marketing for PR, I mean, for poetry, if you will. Like I can and I feel like my book is accessible, and I feel like it is an example of what poetry for the community can do. Like Sandra Cisneros, I'm writing for people who haven't been to school for poetry,
yeah.
who don't have 20 books, 30, 40 books of poetry in their homes. I'm writing for those people. So the book, I started to feel a lot more confident, I would say late 2021, early 2022, thinking about what my book could do. and to get over myself, get over my, whatever doubts I had, get over that and put this book out because there are people who want to read it and there are people who are going to appreciate it. And that was also inspiring for me.
Absolutely. No, I can feel the passion of what really that your debut means to you. No, I think that's beautiful. And we thank you so much for sharing such that personal information with your brother as well as, your youngest daughter. And yeah, there's dreaming and mourning. I feel like now myself, the viewers, it all kind of is a full circle moment. Now what a beautiful, I think beautiful. I think that's still very beautiful though.
Thank
We find beauty in that pain and we find purpose in that pain. Like you said, you looked at your children and you said, like, you have a lot of life to live. We have to figure this thing out, right? So no, I think that's very, very beautiful. Kind of now shifting gears here. So at Performance Gallery in Leimert Park, you co-curated and moderated a Black August education and poetry series with poet and jazz musician Nyla Porter. I want to talk a little bit about that experience and why these kind of multidisciplinary collaborations with poetry, why are they so important? And tell us about how that curation kind of came together with you two. Black August. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's I think one of the highlights of last year, but also of what I do in my world, right? Which is to try to work with as many different kinds of people as possible.
Yes.
So Naila Porter is, I'm not sure if she still is, but she last year was the poet in residence at the World Stage Performance Gallery. So anybody who's in Los Angeles knows about World Stage in Leimert Park. And if you are watching this from some other place, as I'm sure many people are, or listening from some other place, when you come to Los Angeles, make sure you stop by on Wednesday nights to the World Stage Art and Performance Gallery in Leimert Park. It's in South LA off Crenshaw Boulevard. And you can also take the train there now. You can get off at the Leimert Park station and walk over. So it's a jazz. It started Billy Higgins, jazz poet, Kamal Daoud, started this performance gallery. And then eventually poetry was interwoven because Kamal is a poet and a blues musician.
Mm.
And so Naila Porter, who is also she's a photographer, she is a jazz vocalist and a poet, called me, and she's also, at least last year, she was the poet in residence at the World Stage, called me and said, I want to put this Black August event together and I'd love for you to co-curate it with me.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, yes. Because if Naila calls you, like, I'm doing it. And Black August has been important to me. And for those of you who do not know, listening or watching, Black August was started in 1979, San Quentin Prison,
Mm.
to protest the deaths, the murders of George and Jonathan Jackson, who were being held prisoner there because of their Black liberation work.
Mm.
And so the prisoners in San Quentin organized essentially what was a teach-in. So it started as a protest, but it was a teach-in to teach Black prisoners about liberation, about Black history, eating healthy foods, exercising, reading authors that promoted Black liberation. And what were the strategies that you could use to liberate yourself even when incarcerated? And so the families also joined because when a person goes to prison, it's not just the person, the whole family goes to prison. So families started educating themselves outside of the prison walls. And so it became this it was called Black August. And if you look at the different uprisings that happened, various people who were born in August, August is a very heavy month. So you've got the Watts uprisings, you've got Marcus Garvey born. I mean, if you just look at August, it is a powerful, powerful month. So when Naila asked me to co-curate it with her, we had the Wednesday night slots, which were usually reserved for poetry. And we decided we wanted to do our own version of a teach-in. And so we had, I think there were 5 nights in August, and we had 4 of them available. So what we did was we had a night of elders. We had Kamau Daoud and Tongo Eisen Martin, who's the poet laureate of San Francisco. They were in conversation. So we brought him down from San Francisco to Los Angeles to be in conversation with Kamau Daoud. We had a night where the youth, I was the moderator for the Black Star Line. So that was a night of diasporic Black poetry. So we had Lucas Rivera from Puerto Rico. We had Bridget Bianca from Louisiana. Lisbeth Koiman from Venezuela, and Fly High from Jamaica. So they're all of us are living here, but they're all from different places with Black populations. And so we came together because Marcus Garvey's idea was to have a diasporic conversation, to have a diasporic connection. So it was a really powerful. Every Wednesday night was powerful. We had a wonderful range of voices, and for me, this is what poetry is. We're working with jazz musicians. We're working with teachers. We're working with congueros like Lucas Rivera, who plays congas and uses the African rhythms from Puerto Rico to infuse his poetry. Naila also as a photographer. So poetry is just one aspect of art. And I feel like if we can make all of these genres speak together, it's a very enriching experience for the artist and of course for the audience. So for me, I want to work with an architect one day. I want to work with whoever wants to create art, and we want to use poetry as part of its foundation. I think it's very enriching for people, and it shows that you can't just silo poetry. It belongs in all of the spaces. And in fact, our poet laureate, Ada Limon, just had a poem etched, and it is in space. So let's work with the sciences too. And poetry is a bit of a science, because if we're using rhythm, rhyme scheme, syllables, all of that, that's also part of the technical aspect. So it's important to me because I think it shows our diversity, our elasticity, and are willing to come together with lots of different people.
Absolutely. No, a big congrats to you. And like you said, it is, I mean, it's the word is everywhere. Since the beginning of time, I mean, like we've had a recorded history of our words have shaped our society. Undoubtedly, I would say, a lawyer in the courtroom is using poetry to fight their case, right? The teacher in the classroom, the children playing across the schoolyard. I mean, it's just our words. Everything is poetry. Everything is our oral tradition because we're recording down our history when we speak. And like you said, even in musicality, for those that may have a diverse set of abilities that may not use words,
Mhm.
there's poetry in that movement. There's poetry in the way how people create sound. It's everywhere that we are, right? So no,
It
I
is.
love that. Yeah.
It is. And I think that's and part of what we have to get people to see. I think my job as a teacher and as a poet is
Mhm.
to show people that you have that ability already within you.
Yes.
Read
Mhm.
your text messages. I tell people, read the text message. If you
Yeah.
text, you've got some bars in there when
Yes. Yes,
you're
ma'am.
excited.
Yes.
And you can even read, if you're on Instagram, read people's comments, the good ones, but even the ones that are kind of trollish and toxic, right?
Yeah.
People have the ability when you are ignited by something, that inner poet shows up. So
Yes.
the idea is to constantly be connecting to that. So the architect, the scientist, the computer engineer, the builder, the home decorator, like all of it is poetry. We just have to expand the definition and allow more people in to say, no, you are a poet.
Mm.
You are a poet.
Ab-
Even your show,
Yeah.
even your show, it's giving space to poets, but the conversation is is poetic in the sense that we're talking about beauty and we're talking about beginnings. All of that is the foundation of storytelling.
Yes. No, absolutely. Absolutely. It's the idea of, like you said, it is storytelling, and we all have a story to tell, right? One of my favorite quotes of all time is 1,000 books, 1,000 different stories. That literally is the history of everyone on this planet. We all have such a unique path that we've walked, that only we've walked. So we all have a story to tell. Essentially, we are all modern day griots, and
Yeah.
we are all modern day storytellers. So it's so important. No, I love that. Now, kind of my last point with that co-curation of Black August, I mean, what was the biggest takeaway that you were able to learn from those that participated in that? What was your own personal just moment where you were like, where it really, really touched your spirit, heart, and soul? What was the biggest takeaway and moment?
My biggest takeaway moment. Well, 2. Can I have 2?
Yes, you can have to.
Okay. Okay. So one was the importance of listening to the stories of the elders. So the first night we had Sequoia Mercier, we had uh we just had like we had Curtis Robinson on percussion and on guitar. We had so many wonderful elders on stage. And I think that, and then of course later on, I think night 3, week 3 was Kamal Daoud. I think the importance of remembering the stories of the elders, because one day we're all going to be elders. And depending on how old we are, we're already kind of elders in some spaces. So I think the importance of making sure that we keep the stories of the elders, we listen to the stories of the elders, and we center them if we can. I think that is important. We are a bit of a youth obsessed society, but I think that in traditional Black societies, whether they are in the Caribbean or where they are in Latin America or on the continent of Africa, the elders are a really important aspect of our society. So I would say one of my big takeaways was the importance of capturing those stories. And even in my classroom, I try to have students do work where they are listening to their parents, they're listening to their grandparents and other people,
Mm,
because those stories and traditions are going to be gone when they're gone unless you are the person that keeps them.
mm,
Second takeaway was the immense diverse talent that's in the world of poetry.
yeah.
I think that that was something that was just I already knew, but it was so affirming to see how many different kinds of poets were using their talents to show up as as they were given, with the talent that they were given. I think if you hear Bridget Bianca, she performs a lot in Los Angeles. She's just dynamic. And then you have Lisbeth Guayman, who's telling these incredible stories from Venezuela. I mean, you just have Lucas Rivera doing work about Puerto Rico, Fly High, from Texas, but her lineage is Jamaican, and reclaiming that. I mean, so that for me was just exciting. Tongo Eisen Martin doing his work. And I mean, just the ways in which we are so diverse. And I don't use that lightly.
Mm.
I use it like there are so many interesting people doing fantastic work. And I was like, imagine how powerful that is. You bringing all those people into a room together. That was a really big takeaway, was to keep that aspect of of diversity, reaching out to different kinds of poets and try to put them all on the stage together if you can.
Absolutely. No, I love that idea more so of community, not competition, right? Getting
Yes.
everyone in the same place. No, because I think a lot of people, it becomes a thing of you want to be so creative in the arts, and you can only kind of go so long with just being a creative by yourself in your own silo. A lot of people don't know where to reach out to find like-minded people. So it's
Mm.
like we do need these more of these spaces where people are surrounding each other, holding safe spaces, holding community, holding each other's hand, and finding each other through the art. Because a lot of people don't know where to begin to find fellow like-minded people, especially in the writing community, especially as Black writers, right? So many of us really is, where do you find your people, your tribe, if you will, right? So I think you make such a great point there. No, and are we looking forward to another Black August?
I hope so. I hope so. I'm gonna need to reach out to Nye. She's been working on a few projects. She's got an album coming out. So I'm
Nice.
gonna reach out to her and just see if we're gonna make that happen again because it was really dynamic and it was very well received. And I think that was another affirmation was that we packed the house most Wednesday nights. People came out to hear the poets,
Mm,
to experience the program, and people came up to us and said, "We learned so much.
yes.
We learned so much." And, and I think like that's also what the original 1979 Black August was about, was, we've got the freedom schools too, right, of the 1960s,
Mm,
teaching folks teaching folks and allowing people in our community to be those local experts.
yes.
We're just doing the gathering and putting the questions together and creating the space, but these are the local folks who are teaching us. And I think that is something that was really impactful. And I wanted to just shout out S. Pearl Sharp, who was also on that panel. And I just worked with her moderating a panel at Beyond Baroque. She has a fantastic film called Life of a Saxophone, which is a
Mhm.
docu film, a docu poem film about Kamau Daoud. So, she is a octogenarian, vibrant, making great films. S. Pro Sharp's Sharp Show is her on Instagram. She's not on that much, but her work is really powerful. And these are the stories, and these are the people that we need to keep close, and also to keep connected with and learn from them.
Absolutely. I love that. No, thank you so much. Benin, I mean, you've just been dropping gems all day. Thank you for sharing such a sacred experiences that you've had and such amazing work that you're doing in the community and furthermore, really worldwide through your art. So as we are wrapping up, the last question we have for you, Benin, why do you need to get your words out?
I've been thinking about this question, and I'll say, in the words of slain Palestinian poet Rafat al-Arir, who was killed in December of last year by Israeli airstrike, he wrote, "If I must die, you must live to tell my story." And that is part of a conversation that he took from Claude McKay, who in 1919 wrote, "If we must die." And it was about Black soldiers coming back from World War I and the racism and violence that they experienced. And so I thought about, why must I get my words out? And I'm thinking about these two poets particularly, and this way of like, if I must die. Part of my calling as a poet is to use that space that I've been given. And I feel like I've been given such a talent. I've been given a passion
Mm,
teaching, and it's part of my legacy. I was giving a talk on Monday night to a class, and I talked about lineage. And I tell the story of my great grandfather who started a school in Camden, Alabama in the early 1900s, and he sent the girls to school and not the boys.
mm,
He sent the girls to school because he understood that girls and women were the keepers of culture. And he said to my father, who knew him, "Well, I knew the girls would teach other people to read, that they would do the math, that they, like he
mm.
sent the boys." So my father's father was sent out to work the farm. I don't think he had much of an education, maybe fourth grade, fifth grade, the equivalent of, but the girls, right? So my great grandfather, Fortune Williams, saw in the future, look what I could do, right? And maybe it wasn't that like super planned,
Mm,
but he saw the future and was like, I'm going to get these women educated, these girls who are going to become women educated. So why do I have to get my words out? Because somebody was saying 2 generations ago, right? 100 years ago, hey, I'm expecting you to go to preserve the culture. So for me, it's also a responsibility.
Wow.
Fortune Williams and his wife, my grandmother, Mary, were like, yeah, let's do something. And I think a lot of Black people have been thinking that way, especially right after slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow. We're thinking about what are the ways in which we can preserve our culture and preserve our people. So I'm getting my words out because I feel like that has been asked of me through the generations.
Mm,
And it brings me a lot of joy. It's a lot of fun.
yeah,
It's not all heavy and serious. Like, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to watch people light up when they write a poem. It's a lot
absolutely.
of fun when people come out to a poetry show and are, clapping and standing up, and it's a lot of fun to connect with people that way. So I'm getting my words out because, I'm also not good at basket weaving or, architecture. Like, this is the gift I have. So I'm going to use what I have, and I've been having so much fun. And I think in my own corner of the world, hopefully making a difference.
Absolutely. No, you are making a huge difference. We really appreciate that. That's such a beautiful answer, such a beautiful legacy that you're continuing to carry on. And I know the words you just said, I know will speak to a lot of different people when they hear them. So, Benin, a big thank you. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence on today's show. Thank you so much. Now, before we end officially, I do want to ask you, what is 2024 looking like for your writing and beyond? And where can folks find out all of your amazing projects? Drop any websites or social medias for the folks to look at and find you out at.
Okay, so I'm on Instagram. It's one of my favorite places. I love Instagram. So you can find me on Instagram at Benin_Lemos. And if you just type in Benin, you'll see my photo. Like, you'll see the country and some other, but you'll see me. I think I'm like first, second, or third, sort of, if you type in Benin. You can find me at BeninLemos.com. So that's where you can just read some of my work, see some of the stuff that I've done, some photos, a little bit, of biography. And this year, I'm just doing more. I have no book plans right now. I've got a couple of new pieces coming out, and I haven't signed my contracts yet, so I can't put the word out. But I've got some new pieces coming out in a couple of journals, and I'm really excited about that. I've got some readings coming up this summer, which you can find out about on Instagram. So that's a place to follow me so you can see like where I'm performing, where my work is being published. And of course, I am gearing up for my class at UCLA. So I'll be posting about that as well. So that's 2024 is shaping up to be just more writing, more reading. I want to get a lot more reading in this year, and popping up here and there for some performances.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Benin, all of her info will be in the detail box no matter where you are listening to this amazing podcast. All of her detail box below. All right, Benin, thank you so much for being a guest today on the Poet Speaks podcast.
Thank you, Amanda. What a joy. What a pleasure. I appreciate you so much.
All right, that's Benin, everyone. Again, check out all of her amazing work. Everyone, this is the Poet Speaks podcast. Again, we are the #1 spoken word poetry podcast in the world. Check us out. We're streaming everywhere. All right, bye-bye, everyone.